This is America in Space, a weekly news and information program on current events dealing with the space industry.
Welcome, and thanks for joining me today. I'm Dawn Meyer, Space Coast News Editor. Did you know that the lunar module from Apollo 10 is still circling the Earth after over 50 years? It's true. Now, how did this happen? Well, first, here's Primal Space with the description of the Apollo 10 mission.
Apollo 10 was a bit different. Designed as a rehearsal for the upcoming Apollo 11 mission, Apollo 10 did everything apart from actually landing on the moon. Once in lunar orbit, astronauts Thomas Stafford and Eugene Cernan descended to just 15 kilometers above the lunar surface. After testing out Snoopy's systems, the bottom half of the lunar module was ditched and eventually crashed into the moon. Now, with just the top half, the astronauts returned to the command module and prepared to leave Snoopy behind.
Now, once the crew was preparing to leave Snoopy behind and have it crash onto the moon, something went wrong.
This was an important step before the crew could return to Earth, but it didn't quite go as planned. As the explosive bolts released, it blew a hole in the lunar module's hatch. This caused all of the air to rush out, making Snoopy shoot off much faster than expected. In the blink of an eye, the crew lost track of the now abandoned spacecraft as it went into the sun's glare. A few hours later, NASA lost track of the spacecraft. Because it was following the same path as the crew, NASA was worried that its orbit might come back and collide with the command module. However, it still had a lot of fuel left over, and so, instead of letting it crash into the moon, NASA decided to fire its engines and send it on a trajectory far away from the astronauts. Snoopy continued burning until it ran out of fuel a few minutes later. Despite losing track of it initially, the astronauts on board the command module actually saw Snoopy performing its burn. This was the last time Snoopy was ever seen by humans.
Then, in 2018, Snoopy was apparently found again. Here's a detailed explanation of how Snoopy managed to go into orbit around the sun and play tag with the Earth every so often, and then be tracked by astronomers.
To understand where Snoopy went after its burn, we need to look at how the Earth and Moon were positioned. The Earth orbits the Sun counterclockwise at around 30 kilometers per second. The Moon orbits the Earth counterclockwise at around 1 kilometers per second. And so, relative to the Sun, the Moon also moves at roughly 30 kilometers per second. The Apollo 10 crew were orbiting the Moon clockwise, so in the opposite direction to the Moon's orbit around Earth. When Snoopy did its final burn, the Moon was around on the Earth's trailing side. This burn added an extra 1 kilometers per second to its moon velocity, allowing it to escape the Moon's gravity. But because this velocity was in the opposite direction to its motion around the Sun, Snoopy's speed relative to the Sun was now slower than that of Earth. This burn effectively slammed on the brakes, while the Earth and Moon carried on as normal. This meant Snoopy now had a little bit less velocity to fight against the Sun's gravity, and so its orbit got pulled in. Now traveling mostly on the inside of Earth's orbit, Snoopy was completing its lap around the Sun quicker than Earth, once every 342 days. This meant it started to race ahead of the Earth and slowly pull away. Snoopy continued racing around the Sun for another 15 years before it finally made a close flyby of Earth. When this happened, Earth's gravity pulled on the spacecraft, changing its orbit ever so slightly. And every future encounter with Earth would have changed its trajectory, adding much more uncertainty to its location. But knowing these uncertainties allowed astronomers to limit their search to a specific part of the sky. But this was no easy task, since astronomers would have to search for a 4-meter-wide object in an absolutely massive area of space. Nonetheless, finding Snoopy became the holy grail for astronomers, and it was only a matter of time before they found something special. According to the predictions, Snoopy would have made several close encounters with Earth, with the most recent one being in 2018. That is when astronomers discovered this very faint object flying through our night sky. Initially thought to just be an asteroid, astronomers became suspicious after analyzing it a bit further. Asteroids typically have a more oval-shaped orbit, on a plane that's tilted compared to Earth. Initial calculations of this object showed that it had a more circular orbit around the Sun. On further inspection, the orbital plane of this object wasn't tilted, but in fact perfectly matched the orbital plane of Earth. This meant it was more likely to be something that originated from Earth. The object was also moving at a very similar speed to Earth, whereas an asteroid would usually have a much greater speed. Another important giveaway was the object's brightness. Astronomers had calculated what an object with Snoopy's shape, size, and material would look like at various distances, and the light from this object seemed to match that. Amazingly, astronomers discovered this object when it was 55 million kilometers away from us. But this meant it was too faint to really analyze.
So how will we ever know if the object that was found is indeed Snoopy? Well, it should come close enough in 2028 for astronomers to run spectroscopy observations, which means measuring the light from the object at different wavelengths and determining what material it's made from. Only then will we be able to confirm if it really is Snoopy. It'll be interesting to know. It's just hard to believe that this object has been orbiting the Earth all of this time, and maybe, just maybe, it will eventually be identified and possibly even be recovered.
Snoopy is the only spacecraft once occupied by humans to still be traveling through space. Despite going off on a crazy journey 54 years ago, the laws of physics mean that it will continue to call home every now and then. Perhaps in the future, we will have the ability to retrieve the abandoned spacecraft and finally bring it back to Earth, where its crazy journey all began.
Thank you for joining me. Remember each Tuesday to join David Denault for America's Return to Space, and join me every Friday for America in Space. From the Florida Space Coast, I'm Dawn Meyer, Space Coast News Editor for About Space Today.
Thanks for listening. Be sure to share our program with your family and friends, and follow us on Facebook. Join us each week for news and information on America in Space.